Hello and welcome to another normal review. This one is for the Samyang 14mm f2.8 super wide lens. I have had this lens now for about 3 years and I have found it to be useful in a few different situations. A lot of people go for lenses like this because they want to get into star or astrophotography. And for that it's fantastic. It is a very wide lens, and because it's got a 2.8 aperture, you can get some really nice shots with a reasonable shutter speed. That's really the main use that I've had for it, although it is kind of good for parties and also just giving a bit of atmosphere to your shots. If you want a shot that's going to establish where you are or what your surroundings are, it's pretty good for that. It's not so much of a walk around everyday lens, it's a bit of a specialty lens. So I'm just going to give you a bit of a tour of it and show it to you just using my phone. It's a well built little lens. It's fairly heavy. It's got that massive front element on there, which is, as you can see, it's kind of bulging right out, and that allows it to get a very wide field of view. On the other side we've got the mounting ring, which is fully metal and quite solid. It is a manual focus lens, so there's no autofocus on this, and it's also manual aperture. So this ring at the back here controls your aperture, which goes from 2.8 all the way up to 22, and the focus ring is here with range indicators on there. So the focus ring has quite a stiff feeling to it, which, depending what you prefer, is a good thing or a bad thing. I've never had a problem with it. I find it quite good, quite easy to use, and yeah, it's a good feeling little lens. It's quite heavy. It's fully metal. The case is fully metal, which is great, and it feels solidly built for a third-party manufacturer's lens. This is a full frame lens. It's got Canon's EF. Well, I've got the EF version for Canon, and that means it fits a full frame camera, which takes full advantage of that 14mm focal length. If you put this onto a crop sensor camera, you're not going to get the full benefit out of it. It's still a very wide lens for those cameras, and also putting it on a crop sensor takes away from some of that distortion at the edge. But if you really want to see those ultra wide sort of, those kind of shots, you need to be using it on a full frame camera. It is not a fisheye lens, so it doesn't produce a rounded sort of look. It produces a uniform sort of, a plane shaped image, which is good if that's what you're going for. It does darken a little bit at the corners. A lot of that can be corrected in post using Lightroom or Photoshop and the right profile to get rid of that slight distortion and correct it a little bit. I've found that it can be a little bit off with the exposure, which if you're shooting RAW is not a huge deal because you can correct a lot of those issues in post, but if you're shooting JPEG, then you can find that some of your shots, which you think are just fine, are actually dramatically overexposed, and it pays to keep checking your camera all the time with this lens if you're using it in that way. I've also noticed a little bit of color reproduction, I would say, issues. So, I mean, it produces a nice, crisp, clear image, but it tends to reproduce the colors a little bit differently to, say, a Canon lens. It's not necessarily a bad thing or a hard thing to correct in Lightroom or Photoshop. It's just different. So the colors just all come out just slightly different, and you just need to play around with them a little bit in post. Which adds a few more steps to your developing process. So being a 2.8 lens maximum means that it's pretty good in low light. Obviously one of the main uses is using this for astrophotography, so it would have to be good in the dark. It is nice and fast. 2.8 is not the absolute fastest lens you can get, but it is definitely not a bad lens in terms of speed. The manual focus and the manual aperture rings can be a bit of a challenge for someone who's maybe used to using a camera which basically takes care of everything itself. I find that the best way to use it is to use the live view function on the camera and sort of zoom right in on what I'm trying to focus on and get it perfectly in focus before taking the shot. This is really good if you are stationary and if you're using a tripod for something like stars or a nighttime scene. But otherwise, if you're in a fast-moving environment like at a party, or you're at some sort of event, or you're trying to capture something that's moving, it's not the best for focusing, because obviously it's hard to get that focus spot on. Obviously, with such a narrow aperture at 2.8, the field of view, the field of focus is quite narrow. So you may have to play around with it a bit and stop it down a bit as well to sort of hedge your bets. So all in all, I think it's a good specialty lens in terms of you're going to use it in certain situations. I think the pricing is quite reasonable. I think I got this one for about $350 US. I'm not sure if I've really used it enough to justify that, but I'm not really thinking about getting rid of this lens just yet, because I still get enough use out of it that I think it will pay itself off over time. Astrophotographers, you're going to love it. It's a very popular choice for people shooting the stars, and you may find a lot of other uses for it as well in terms of landscapes, and even for video shooting it's quite good. It's a great way to get your establishing shots, and you don't particularly need autofocus for that, so it can be quite good for videographers as well. So that's really all there is to it. If you're thinking about buying the lens, I would encourage you to find someone with this lens and have a go with it first and see what you think before you commit to buying it, or even maybe think about renting it. If you are an astrophotographer, you're probably going to love it, and if you're not, you'll probably find some kind of use for it, but maybe not as much as you think you will. Thanks very much for watching, and make sure you like and subscribe, and if you've got any questions then hit me up in the comments, and I'll see you next time.